the committee is becoming increasingly aware of is, and it's no different, we've had the same conversations about the APCs and our ability to support and have staff attend all of these meetings. You have 9, actually 10 parks commissions. That's a lot of requirement of staff to attend those, and we make an attempt at the very least once a year. I believe we do, some of our operations staff do go out more frequently. This is, the issue of budget accountability is a philosophical issue. You are the ones who establish the budget, and staff are accountable to you as a board for expending those funds. If a budget goes over budget, we're accountable to the board. We're not accountable to commissions for budgets. You've assigned those budgets as a board to staff to expend and to execute. So I just want to distinguish between letting the commissions know that a budget may be over budget or a project may be over budget, versus being accountable and explaining exactly why. Those matters have to come to the board, and we will be looking at how we're going to do that more efficiently with the board for all of our capital projects, not just parks, recreation facilities, all the capital projects that we work on. So I just want to, I guess what I'm concerned about is raising some expectations. The wording in here is about providing advice, and some of that advice may be that if a project was to go over budget and we needed to change scope of a project in order to keep it within budget, that the commission may provide some advice as to what elements of the project maybe to delete or to defer to another phase of the project, something like that. We would be looking for, you know, that kind of advice. So there's a difference between advice and being accountable to a group for budget overruns, because at the end of the day, that's really the board who staff are accountable to.
Director Morrison.
Yeah, just to echo that, in that if it's been my experience, if park staff see a looming invoice coming in that's going to put something 10% over on a project, they're in touch with me real quick. And it doesn't go over unless there's been additional accommodations made. And they usually discuss that with the Parks Commission. We can't get to this project because this is 10,000 over or whatever. The difficulty that I'm having with the suggestion of anything around oversight is it inserts another individual or committee into a budgeting and billing and process that is challenging for staff to begin with. And if I hadn't had just this experience last year where I had my Parks Commission challenging the value of some work that was done and the amount of time I put into inquiring about it and staff having to bird dog stuff and the likes, that's where that capacity question comes in. So I think in practice, staff are doing a very good job of ensuring that, especially on capital items, that they're sticking to budget, they're following the purchasing procedures and the like, they're doing everything that they need to do. And if there is going to be an anomaly, we are made aware. And if there's an accommodation that needs to be made, the commission is usually approached because it's something that they will have discussed in a work plan. But I'm very leery about any kind of language that says that there's a ability for the commission to insert themselves in a active project where there might be a need for staff to stop and gather data and report out to the commission when they're carrying on the normal course of business. And Brian is absolutely correct. If a project comes in over budget, they got to report that to us, not the commission. That's we're where the buck stops. Thank you.
So, okay, we have, I'm calling them amendments, three different requests have come from Director Wilson. And should we just do one at a time? So the first one was up to 11 members. So do I call a question on that? Sure. Well, first of all, it's got to be, do we move in second? It was not. So we need to move that it's up to 11 members. Mover and a seconder. Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to the other amendment, which was 10, up to 10 for the sub-regional.
Point of clarification.
Okay.
Are we allowing there to be odd-numbered commissions now? Because that's the effect of that resolution.
Yeah, they are even.
Or, I mean, only even-numbered commissions. That's why it was 7, 9, or 11.
Oh, okay, so.
So,
This
what's the
is,
effect of-
this is what was requested by Director Wilson, this is
Yep.
what I heard. Five areas with 2 representatives would make it 10 for the sub-regional, that's what I heard, so I don't
But
know.
good governance, we
Okay.
should have odd-number commissions.
Mr. Crothers?
Yeah, I'm going to go back on the first one that you just
Oh,
voted on, my apologies.
Yep.
So
Okay.
the operative words there are up to, and we deliberately took that out.
Oh,
Well, it's challenging, because now you've left it wide open to
Uh-oh.
the numbers, and that's what staff were attempting to do, is to solidify the numbers at either, and there was, appeared that there wasn't unanimous agreement around one particular number, so that's why staff provided the option of 7, 9, or 11. A, to maintain the odd number in terms of voting, and secondly, to provide flexibility that individual areas may choose to have 7, as Director Salmon indicated, and some larger commissions may choose to have 11. Just simply saying up to 11 creates challenges for us again, because now we have just up to, and we're going to have different numbers. So I would suggest that if you want one number and you want to keep it at 11, then that's fine. If you want flexibility, I'm going to suggest to you that you leave it as 7, 9, or 11, and that you have the ability to choose which number you want for your commission.
7, 9, or 11, and so that. Okay, 7, 9, or 11, but we voted on it. So now we'd have to.
I have a referral motion.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
yes, thank you.
as a group, you should pass a motion rescinding the motion you just passed.
Okay. Okay, seconder to rescind the motion we just passed. Is there a seconder? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Back to 7, 9, or 11. Director Morrison.
Madam Chair, I have a real concern with crafting this on the fly again. We only got the recommended resolutions from the director this morning. I didn't have a chance to read them. So we're now crafting something on the fly based on something we got this morning. I want to move to refer this back to staff so that these suggestions can be considered and brought back to the next electoral area services meeting.
Okay, it's been moved to referral. Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to unfinished business 2, which Keith Batstone. I hope there isn't a whole bunch of. So last one.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, electoral area directors.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so this unfinished business, as you know from having read your reports. As a brief reminder, I'm returning, providing greater clarification about the actual procedures. So I've sent out, just circulated a table, which will highlight in a few slides' time. It'll hopefully be the focus of our discussion here. But the reason I'm before you, I won't belabor the point. You already know we have staff issues. We have a high volume of applications. We're experiencing difficulty in processing the applications. You've heard parallels in the building inspection world and in the development permit world. We're effectively in a situation where we're juggling a whole lot of files, and until we have further staff to accept the other fifth or quarter or whatever the number is associated with the files that have yet to be assigned, we're going to have some problems. Therefore, we are looking at a procedure. The recommendation is before you. I will park that until the end. Key principles that I want to remind you about. Staff are recommending that permit application procedures have the intended effect of prioritizing developments that would, 1, result in community-focused economic, environmental, or social benefit. The development would address public safety concerns. Development would respond to bylaw enforcement issues, and development would result in site-specific benefits. We already talked about this. Here we'll get into the ordering But I want to, in advance of that, remind you of what these things are. So if I've, on the table before you, on the screen, there's two columns, focus and scale of development. So that's where we see community-focused development, which I've highlighted in your report means, so community-focused developments may involve rezoning, complex development permit applications for commercial, industrial, institutional, multi-lot residential subdivision developments, et cetera. Public safety, and I've fleshed this out. I've separated public safety and bylaw enforcement. We can go into that and discuss that a little bit if you want, but I think they're distinguishable items. So public safety could at times involve rezoning applications, development permit applications, development variance permit applications that authorize, and this is the key point, the redevelopment of allegedly unauthorized buildings and structures, and can also involve damaged properties, again, alleged contraventions of our bylaw. Site-specific development might involve development permits, variance permit applications, subdivision, sign permit, hazardous tree removal applications for all types of properties, and are generally the type of applications that are more easily processed if they're compliant with the bylaw. And this is where I'm going to get into this prickly bit about, okay, over on one hand, we have a staff shortage problem, and now what do we do with it? Because it's a complex issue. I think this graphic starts to help. If you look at the y-axis on the right, community benefit, it's arguable that community-focused development, as I've defined it, would result in community benefits, high community benefits, as opposed to a site-focused development proposal, which generally speaking would have lower community benefit. Right in the middle is that sweet spot, is the development safety and bylaw enforcement issues, which I hope we can all agree generally have a community benefit component to them. On the bottom of your this table, in the gray to black gradient bar, I've highlighted time, because I think there's a correlation between community-focused developments, which generally take a long time to process. So these bars are essentially a 1 out of 10 scenario. We all know that rezoning takes a long time, but you get down to the site-focused development area, it could be a very, very short processing time because it's something that's delegated to staff. But site-focused development can also be up to an 8 in terms of its time and complexity, because there are maybe incomplete aspects to an application, or requires an amendment to zoning, for example. So I'll add another layer of complexity. Now we have in red non-compliant properties. So this dealing and rectifying with non-compliant properties is probably one of the hardest challenges a professional planner has, and a property owner has. If they've done something, whether intended or otherwise, and it results in a development scenario where there's something on the ground that is basically not approvable under current policy or zoning bylaws. So we have to change everything, and that's why those red bars go now up to a 10 out of 10. They take a lot of time, and I would add on top of that, they take a lot of human resources, and oftentimes there's a lot of legal cost implications. So they're complex. So what do we do to kind of unravel this messiness? Again, to the sheet in front of you, a 6 order of priority for community-focused development, public safety, bylaw enforcement, site-specific development, and those last 2, 5 and 6, community-focused development for non-conforming properties. This is frankly stuff that any normal professional or normal person on the street would likely agree with you. The development as proposed would probably bring the community a benefit. But does it take 2 years to get there because of the complexity of the situation? The OCP amendments that need to occur. I mean, we've heard this recently today with Timber West. A lot of people agree, there's some disagreement that that's a good project. It takes a long time to get there, and therefore we need to put those at the bottom. I'm going to wrap this up. This is all about, in Development Services' opinion, sending the right signals back to the development community. We have staffing issues. We can't get through them in the order that we receive them. Therefore, we're going to prioritize them on the basis of what we expect as potential outcomes. That's the middle column in this sheet, and we'll get them through the process with your buy-in. I have a third column on this table that I just draw your attention to. This is something we've discussed internally, but the notion, and I'm seeking your buy-in on this. In order to help complete this prioritization, Development Services is very much of the position that in order to put public safety matters and bylaw enforcement matters at the top, we also need to send that signal back to the development community that asking for forgiveness after the fact is not good enough. We know there's a lot of stumbling blocks in getting through the development permit process in the CVRD. It's generally not in the public's benefit to allow good development to happen through an all lawful process. We want to send that signal back to the development community and landowners that, sure, you can go ahead and do it. If it's compliant with the bylaw, we'll eventually approve it, but we're also going to hit you, arguably where it hurts in your pocketbook and apply a 2 times application fee for these type of permits that come in after and are asking for forgiveness. Similar process to what you see in the building inspection world. It's common across most of North America, and we strongly recommend that you consider giving staff some latitude to investigate the feasibility of a 2 times application process for after the fact applications.
What do you mean not today?
So, to the rec, we can incidentally bring a report forward on that specific issue. I know staff have a list of procedure application matters that we would like to discuss, but so again, to bring focus to my presentation, I apologize. We're seeking your endorsement of the proposed 6-step prioritization ordering.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam. My question is on the double the fee. So when you say that, it sounds bad, but are we saying double of $100 or $200? That's not so bad, but are we able to say if it's something to do with the SPIA, then we're going to give you a $5,000 charge or $2,000, and if you go and start building even a garage, it's going to be $2,000, or
Mr.
can we
Blackwell.
do a set amount?
Thanks. Perhaps I can jump on this one. My recommendation is that you don't go too far down this road right now. I would focus simply on the issue at hand, which is endorsement of this prioritization schedule. You asked as a committee for staff to develop this and bring it back. That has been done, and this is for your consideration, and if you so choose, your endorsement. The whole issue which Mr. Badstone raises about doubling fees, I think is a very valid one, but I would suggest that this needs to be rolled into a larger discussion around a complete review of all of our application fees. But this, I think this is a good placeholder for that further future discussion.
Follow up, Director Acton?
So I guess a better question would be then, is the 2-time application fee meant to be a deterrent, and is it going to be effective at that?
Stole the word right out of my mouth. Yeah, yes, a deterrent. And or to use my original word, a signal back to the community that this is not good enough, and therefore staff's time is worth twice as much. And of course we do tie that to the process.
Director Morrison. Mr. Crothers.
Ed, I just want to add one more element to that. I think as the committee is aware, our fees need to be commensurate with the amount of work involved. And it's one thing to establish a fee for a penalty, but I would argue that the 2-time application fee would be justified in terms of the extra work involved. Because obviously in order to determine that building or that development is non-compliant, an amount of effort has gone into determining that. And that would be more what the fee would be reflective of, is the additional work involved in having to go backwards and start to rectify a problem. So in essence, it would be a deterrent, but it would also be reflective of the extra work that would be involved in processing those, or what led up to having to process it.
Director Morrison's Kuhn and Nicholson.
I'm prepared at any time to move the recommendation, but I want to ask a question, and I don't want to start a whole list of what-ifs, but there's a specific scenario that I'm hoping you might be able to address, and that's when we have someone come in as a late purchaser in a subdivision, and they buy the run to the litter. They buy the worst lot. And it seems that we're getting those applications coming before us where they need, you know, huge variances to setbacks and height restrictions and the likes. And they come to us to make them whole in relation to all of their neighbors in the subdivision when they've bought like the worst lot in the subdivision for a discounted price. And for some reason, it's on us to create that wholeness for them. Is there, within this, like, I don't see that as a high priority, but of course, the individual coming in the door will. Where would we find something, an application like that within your 6 items is best guess?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would believe that, thank you for the opportunity to provide some analysis. Priority order 6 is where that would fit. It's a very much a site-specific development proposal, very little community benefit, and one might suggest it sends a signal back to the original developer that there's something wrong.
So we have, I'll come back to you, Director Morrison, as soon as Director Kuhn, Nicholson, and Smith, and then I'll look for the motion to be moved and seconded. Or, oh, okay. I'll wait for Nicholson and Smith. Director Nicholson?
Well, I apologize. I find this all very confusing. So when we're talking about permit applications, we're talking about, like, you're doing a development and you have a development permit that you've got to deal with. Is that right? That's one kind?
That is one kind
That's
of
one
many.
kind, and
I
then
think there's at least 8 different types of permit applications
Okay,
that
so
I'm
then I
trying
just
to
want to
conceive
make
of.
sure I understand what they are. So there's that, there's rezoning, there's just a conforming subdivision kind of a thing? Like all the rules are laid out and you just want to do what's in the rule book?
Yep. If I could draw your attention on page 2, there's table 1, and then the second paragraph after table 1, you see in italics, community-focused developments starts the paragraph. In that paragraph, I list types of potential applications that would come with that scale and focus of development. There's everything that you're familiar with, rezoning, OCP amendments above that, but below that, development permits, development variance permits.
Agricultural land reserve application?
Well, yeah, ALR would be in there. I apologize that I've glossed over that, but that can be fully captured under site-specific development permits.
And then just the variance
Sign
stuff.
permits.
So, I guess I'm really having a hard time with this community-focused development. To me, this is a very qualitative kind of judgment. And what you might think is a benefit to the community might not be the same as what I consider a benefit to the community, particularly when we're talking about economics or housing growth. So this, to me, seems to weigh in favor of developers doing big development projects. So, or,
Mr. Blatt?
So, you're right. So the reason those are given priorities is because those people hire a lot of people in the community. They bring a lot of trade to building supply, stores, and so on and so forth. So the economic ripple effects are significant. That's why we're giving it priority. The fact of the matter is nobody's going to be happy. That is other than first place. So this is our best shot at shuffling the deck in a way that'll have the greatest effect. But you can interchange these any of 6 different ways if you so choose. This is how we as professional planners recommend you order the priorities. But I have to acknowledge that we are in a difficult situation. There is no, the system that we have right now, which is first come, first serve, is not serving the community well. And this is our professional recommendation as to how you can do it better.
Director Nicholson, just a follow-up?
right, so I get that, we've got a problem, but at the same time, you don't, or maybe I'm wrong here, if we do a community-focused development type of thing, would a rezoning an OCP amendment be in number 1 or not? So this is confusing me, because you've got like, this is different than the tables in your report.
Okay. Okay, I apologize for that. Yeah, very, very fair observation. I thought this table would help. If I can give you some comfort, to answer your question, I think rezoning would be, for a large residential development, would be priority order 5, because it's non-conforming and amendments
Okay.
are required to an OCP. So I hope this gives you a little comfort. If you're at priority order 1 and it's a large residential development, what staff would be looking for is conformance with OCP zoning, OCP designations, with zoning. So your community has already bought into the notion, and we're just trying to further it, as opposed to order 5, which is potentially crazy, potentially offensive, I'm not sure. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Director Nicholson.
Okay, so it is questionable on some of these large developments, whether the community has bought into it, because we have a lot of stuff on the books that's old and maybe not in keeping with today's. And so I want to be really clear about this. There is a development in Area F called Paldy, which is a comprehensive development. And so what you're telling me is if the developers walk in and they exactly put on the table what is in the comprehensive development plan, you would do it as a priority order 1, and if they come in with changes, it would drop down to 5. Is that my understanding?
If we rigidly applied this table, yes.
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. Save it except for if those changes were consistent with the community's vision as set out in the OCP, et cetera. If the changes were not consistent, then it would be 5.
And if the OCP is under review, and the vision is not clear?
I'm going to Director Smith.
I feel that this prioritization undermines the trust in the CVRD by telling citizens of this that the CVRD service is more about money. And so taxpayers have put their trust in us as directors. And if the CVRD is going to look at priorities when it comes to land use and development, and it becomes about money, then that's not quite looking at us as a social group also. Someone who is waiting for a garage that could be set back may provide them for the winter with a warm place to get into their car, and they may not slip and fall and break their hip. So I think that we have to be very cautious in some of the things that we do when we are doing this type of priority.
Mr. Blackwell.
Thanks. Well, I don't know if this will help or not. As I mentioned earlier, this is our recommendation based on what we feel as professional planners is going to serve the community the best for now, until we get on top of this issue. It's not permanent. It's until we're able to get on top of it. We can see no better way. In the alternative, if you prefer to keep it as first come, first serve, certainly we look to you for that direction. If you prefer a different ordering, similarly, we would look to you to provide that direction. But this is our recommendation.
Director Salmon.
Thank you. So just, it's just a little bit off topic, but aside from this list, I think I asked this last time, but re-triage, and like the item today, R3, a simple 2-lot subdivision, no zoning, no variances, why did it have to come to the committee and the board? For either of you two.
The procedure, CVRD's application procedures bylaw requires that this type of application be, the decision on the application be rendered by the board as opposed to being delegated. That's
Sometimes not, though. I've seen them not go by the board.
Director, Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. Some applications are, are eligible to be delegated to staff. Excuse me, that's provided in the legislation. Other kinds of applications are not able to be delegated by law to staff. So to the extent that we can, we've made recommendations as to which kinds of applications would be best suited to forward to staff and which ones either can't be or shouldn't be.
Director Acton, Morrison, and then Kuhn.
This, I think we're getting a little too nitpicky here. We've said, okay, you need to get your house in order, and they said, okay, here, this is how we're gonna get our house in order. And now we're saying, okay, well, we wanna know how you're gonna do that, and they came back and said, this is how we're gonna do it. And now we're saying, well, no, I'm not sure I like that way that you're doing it. So I'm gonna, you guys are the experts, and we'll hear from the community if this wasn't a good idea, but I have faith that this is the best thing to do right now.
Director
So thanks for
Morrison.
bringing this forward.
Like to move the recommendation. If there's a second, I'd like to speak to it.
Director Kuhn, second. Okay. Speak to it, please.
Thank you, and echoing a lot of what Director Acton had just said, we asked staff to give us their best cut at this. They've given us their best cut. They're the experts in the field. We've got a crisis or near crisis on our hands, and this is the best approach to doing this. And well, I hear what Director Smith had said about the prioritization and some people might having to wait a little bit longer. I know that there isn't a director that's been here since the last term that wasn't hearing about the delays and the issues around getting applications through the process here, and something needs to be done, and I'll support this. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna call the question. Director Nicholson.
I just want to be clear that hazard trees would be in public safety, would it not, as opposed to site-specific?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Oh, please, could you read it?
Thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that development permit application processing procedures be adjusted to prioritize development permit applications. Excuse me. If I could, to Mr. Badstone, are you sure you want to specify development permit or all development applications? I've just noticed that.
Might have proposed planning applications.
Okay. Thank you. Perhaps I can amend that then. I'll start from the beginning. That it be recommended to the board that development permit application processing procedures be adjusted to prioritize planning applications that, in descending order of priority, result in the following. 1, result in regional and community scale economic benefits. 2, support bylaw enforcement actions. And 3, result in site-specific development benefits.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now, there is no new business. Moving on now to question period. Is there any questions from the gallery? Seeing none today, we're gonna motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you for your patience while I'm getting back into the swing. Thank you. Oh, look, someone needs to sign my scarf. I don't know where that came from.